We have read the Iliad. We have read the Odyssey. Tonight, the question that the first two episodes have been building to: why are these poems still being read? Not why they were important 2,000 years ago or 500 years ago, but why in the 21st century, in the age of streaming and social media and 1,000 competing forms of entertainment, a poem composed 2,800 years ago in a dead language about a war that may not have happened is still being translated, published, assigned in schools, and read by people who are not required to read it. And what the newest generations of readers are finding in it that earlier generations did not. Every generation of English-speaking readers encounters Homer through translation. The translations are not Homer. They are a translator's interpretation of Homer, shaped by the translator's era, their aesthetic priorities, their assumptions about what poetry should sound like, and what ancient Greek said that cannot quite be said in English. The first major English translation was George Chapman's, published in 1616. It was this translation that the Romantic poet John Keats described in his sonnet On First Looking into Chapman's Homer, the poem that begins, "Much have I traveled in the realms of gold." Keats compared the experience of reading Chapman's Homer to discovering a new planet, to standing on a cliff above a vast, silent sea. The translation gave him access to a world his classical education had given him only abstractly. Alexander Pope's translation, published in 1715 to 1720, was for a century the standard English Homer. Pope translated Homer into heroic couplets, the polished, symmetrical verse form of Augustan English poetry, and produced something magnificent and entirely un-Homeric. Pope's Homer is aristocratic, neat, witty. Homer's Homer is rough, vivid, archaic, formulaic. They are different poems. Richmond Lattimore's 1951 translation attempted, against the trend, to reproduce the rhythmic energy of Homeric Greek in English, using a loose 6-beat line that echoes the dactylic hexameter of the original. It remains among the most respected scholarly translations. And then there is Emily Wilson. In 2017, Emily Wilson published the first English translation of the Odyssey by a woman. In the century since Chapman, dozens of men had translated both epics. Wilson's translation was a significant literary event, not simply because of her gender, but because of what her different perspectives saw in the text. The opening word of the Odyssey in Greek is andra, man, or a man. Traditionally translated as the man or that man, Wilson translated it simply as a man, a subtle but meaningful choice that emphasizes Odysseus's ordinariness at the poem's opening, before we know what he's done and survived. And she translated the Greek word that previous translators had rendered as loyal or faithful, applied to Penelope's female servants who slept with the suitors, as enslaved, which is what the Greek actually says. They were enslaved women doing what enslaved women in occupied households were forced to do. Translation is never neutral. Wilson's Odyssey sold hundreds of thousands of copies and introduced Homer to a new generation of readers who had never been assigned him in school. Her subsequent Iliad, published in 2023, continued the project. What Wilson's translations demonstrated is something the Homer debate has always been about. How you translate a text determines what readers take from it. The politics of translation, whose perspective is centered, which words carry which values, are not secondary to the text. They are constitutive of what readers experience as the text. The 21st century has seen an extraordinary flowering of Homeric retellings, novels that take the material of the Iliad and Odyssey and tell it from perspectives the original poems did not privilege. Madeline Miller's The Song of Achilles, 2011, told the story of Achilles and Patroclus as a love story, explicitly romantic rather than the ambiguous friendship of the original, narrated by Patroclus. It was a commercial and critical phenomenon, winning the Orange Prize for Fiction and introducing millions of readers to the Iliad who had never read it. Its success was partly attributable to the contemporary conversation about LGBTQ+ representation and the visibility of queer love stories in literary fiction. but it succeeded primarily because Miller had read Homer with extraordinary care and produced a novel of genuine emotional intelligence.
Pat Barker's The Silence of the Girls, 2018, the first book of what became a trilogy, narrated the Trojan War from the perspective of Briseis, the captive woman over whose ownership Achilles and Agamemnon argued. It brought the question of what women's lives looked like in the world the Iliad describes, the captive women, the enslaved, the widowed, the survivors, into full literary focus. Barker is a novelist best known for her Regeneration trilogy about World War I. Her approach to the Trojan War was inflected by that history of writing about war's human cost. What the modern retellings share is a refusal to accept the original poem's framing as neutral. The Iliad frames the war from the perspective of the Greek warriors, specifically the male Greek warriors. The women, the Trojans, the enslaved, the ordinary soldiers who are not heroes, they are present but uncentered. The retellings ask, what did they see? What did the war feel like from where they stood? These are not hostile questions. They are the natural questions that careful readers ask when they want to understand the full world a text was made in.
The Trojan War has also been a persistent presence in cinema, though with varying degrees of fidelity. The 2004 film Troy, directed by Wolfgang Petersen with Brad Pitt as Achilles, was a spectacular action film that stripped the gods entirely from the narrative, a commercially sensible choice, a literarily significant one, and simplified the moral complexities into heroic entertainment. It introduced the Iliad to audiences who would never read it, which is not nothing.
More significant, perhaps, are the adaptations that find the Homeric material in unlikely places. James Joyce's Ulysses, 1922, widely considered the greatest novel in the English language, maps the structure of the Odyssey onto a single day in Dublin, turning Odysseus into Leopold Bloom, a Jewish advertising salesman, and Telemachus into Stephen Dedalus, a young intellectual. Joyce's gesture was not merely structural. It was an argument that the Odyssey's questions about home, about belonging, about the wandering self seeking return are not ancient questions, but permanent ones.
The practical answer: Homer is still taught in schools and universities because it is foundational to the literary tradition that school curricula are built to transmit. If you want to understand Virgil, Dante, Shakespeare, Milton, and virtually every Western poet of consequence, you need to understand Homer. The tradition is a conversation, and Homer started it. But that is the institutional answer, the answer about what we require people to read. The more interesting answer concerns what people choose to read and why. Homer is still chosen because the questions he asks are the questions we keep asking. What is worth dying for? The Iliad's central question, and still ours. In every war, in every political crisis, in every personal confrontation with mortality. What does it mean to be home? The Odyssey's central question. And for anyone who has been away, anyone who has returned to find that what they left has changed, anyone who has discovered that home is not a place, but a state of recognition, it is the most urgent question there is. What do we owe each other in the face of shared grief? The final scene of the Iliad, Priam and Achilles, enemies weeping together, is a question that every human conflict eventually arrives at. When the fighting is over, when the positions have been established and the pride satisfied, what remains is the shared weight of what was lost. Homer knew this. He put it at the end, not the beginning.
And the scene with the child and the helmet, that scene, Hector removing his war helmet so his son won't be frightened. I keep returning to it because it is so specific, so precise, so obviously observed, not invented, but remembered. Someone 2,800 years ago watched a parent remove something frightening for a child's sake, and found in that gesture the whole meaning of what war costs. That someone understood what literature is for, not to describe the world from above, but to show it from exactly the right angle,
so that everyone who reads it recognizes something they have seen and not yet had words for. That is why Homer is still read, not because he is required, because he is true.
Literature is the only technology that goes backward in time and still works. Every other technology improves. The newer version does more than the older one. A smartphone from 10 years ago is worse than a smartphone from today. But a poem from 2,800 years ago can be better than a poem from yesterday. Not always, not reliably, but sometimes, what someone made in the distant past out of language and observation and attention and care reaches across all that distance and says exactly what needs to be said. And you read it and you feel less alone. Homer does this, has done it for 3,000 years. We'll do it, I believe, for 3,000 more. Come back next Sunday. A new author, a new world made of words. But tonight, let the Iliad stay open a little longer.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Tell us in the comments if you want something explored by the universe of imagination.